Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today I want to talk to you guys about the salary cap situation. We're a few days into free agency. We've seen most of the moves from this team. There's a bit of talk going around about maybe making a trade for Brandon Ayuk. And so I want you guys to understand where the team is with the cap right now, money we've pushed down the road, what the contracts might look like. Some of them are not official, so I'm projecting a few things. But I generally try to project what I think the team is going to do. And if there's multiple options, I usually choose the one that's the worst for the cap situation now so that, hey, if I'm wrong, it's a better situation than what we projected, right? So we're going to talk about this. There's a few contracts I had on here. So I want to explain those just to start. So first one's Brandon Scherf. And for this, we have not heard anything yet. I don't know why. It's been, I think, like nearly a week since we got the news that he was going to get restructured. But the things that I do know that I found online, I know John Shipley, for one, said that he was taking a pay cut. And then we heard a number of about maybe $5 million getting floated around. And the way that the news worded it, as far as like national media, was they were saving $5 million against the cap, and I think what they meant was that they're saving $5 million on the pay for this year effectively. I think that's the idea, because I assume that's before they convert stuff to signing bonus. I imagine the Jaguars do that. So in this scenario, basically what I've done to Brandon Scherf's contract, I decreased the amount he was getting paid by $5 million this year, because it's what we think it is. And then I took everything extra from this year on top of this $1,210,000 that you can't convert, and I converted the rest of it to signing bonus, because it's generally what the team does when they're trying to save money. It's possible they take the cap hit this year. I would imagine they didn't set it up like that. We'll have to see whenever we get the official numbers. But as far as what Brandon Scherf's contract looks like in that scenario, you're getting your cap hit down about $12 million each of these for this season. Within 2025, 2026, 2027, you have $5 million against the cap all of those seasons. So it's a lot of dead money just on that contract. It's nearly a year's worth. Actually, at the end of the day, it should be worth about a year's worth of what he's earned on average over the 3 years. So that's one contract. Second one, which is probably pretty simple, Dearness Johnson, I just went with a similar cap number to what he earned last year. I think he was at like $1,232,000, so I just went with $1,250,000. I figure that's pretty close to what he'll get. If it's a little over, it's a very I can't say that word, negligible impact. There we go. So not going to be a lot that changes there. And then the final one that we still haven't got the official numbers on was Eric Armstead. Now, I want to note, and I said I'd talk about the cap numbers a little bit when I put out the video that he was signed. I want to note that we still haven't heard anything about what the actual base salary is, or if the $51 million is the base salary over the 3 years, or what. We don't know if it's max value or base value. So it's possible that his contract is cheaper than what it's listed as. But what I went with was that it's all $17 million. That's what's getting paid. No incentives unless it's on top of that. So worst case scenario, like I talked about. And I put on 2 void years to the contract because I figure the Jaguars will probably do something like that. So that gives us a small cap hit this year. $4.3 million roughly. And then 2025, you see it goes up to about $20 million. Same for 2026. And over those last 2 years, the void years, you're getting about $3 million against the cap in those. So that's probably the way the contract's structured, something similar to that. I'm sure there's some fancy mumbo-jumbo involved. But these are our projections. And these are all the signings that the team has done so far. None of the other players have come back yet. We have not seen any cuts yet. Now, I do think that there are more cap savings that will be had. I do believe that. I think Cam Robinson's contract is going to get renegotiated. And that might happen, man, it could be within the week. It could be after the draft if that's possible. I don't know if there's anything where, like, maybe after a certain date it guarantees. I'm not aware of that. But I have a hard time believing they're going to pay him roughly $18 million to play for the team in 2024 when he's missed games the last 2 years. He's played generally well, especially as a pass blocker, but just kind of been an average run blocker. Like, I don't know if they pay that. I think they renegotiate that, if I had to guess. So it's an interesting one with Cam Robinson, but I think that's a player that they want to keep around one more year, especially because if you keep him around, you got to keep in mind, like, even if you don't want him at that price, he's still a valuable player. He's a tackle. He's going to get paid quite a bit when he hits the market. And these teams, when they're planning out their future, I think it's a little bit of the reason why, like, Brandon Scherf sticks around. Not a major reason, but a little bit, kind of like the icing on the cake almost, is that if you get the whole contract through, then you can go get the comp pick when their team spends on him. We'll see if Scherf retires. Who knows there right now. But I imagine Cam Robinson could be a player that gets a pay cut this year, and I think they just have not figured that out yet. Zay Jones could also be a cut. It depends on what they do, right? And we've talked about the Ayuk trade. That is really interesting right now. I will tell you that. To hear the price on it, what people are talking about, it almost feels like it's not even real because we're hearing numbers that are not a first-round pick floated out. And so if that's the case, like, he's getting traded somewhere. He's not going to be in San Francisco because the team's going to bite on that. But we will see. Those are simply just things I've heard. It does not mean it's 100% fact, but there's a lot of people hearing that right now. So those are some players that you might see get renegotiated. You could also see C.J. Beathard potentially be a cut because obviously, like, Mac Jones is going to be on the team this year, right? Like, the only way he goes is if another team gets quarterback desperate and trades for him, middle of the season, since it's like a fifth. I think that's possible. But he's going to be the guy right now to be the backup, and Beathard will probably be gone unless they have a change of philosophy and keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster, which I don't expect that. So that's your contract situation. As far as cap space, in this scenario, you got about $12 million available right now. Your rookie pool is about $4 million. Now, what I mean by rookie pool, it's essentially the amount of money you have to spend on rookies, but the way I'm using it is it's that minus what you save on the players that you would cut. So you keep in mind, like, we got 64 players under contract here. The way it works in the NFL is that the top 51 players, as far as what they're earning, that's how it's determined, count against the cap. So if you sign someone, say you sign someone to a $3 million deal, right? Like 1 year, all against the cap that year. Someone gets replaced who's earning maybe $1 million, and now the effective change is $2 million because you're taking the difference in those numbers. So when I'm talking about rookie pool, I'm taking that into account. And so when you take into account the draft picks, it's about $4 million right now if Jacksonville stays put, which I do not think they will. But that's the number that we currently have. So, having said all that, $12 million in cap space goes down to probably about $8 million. You're going to carry that over to this next year if you don't sign anyone else. And you have about $45 million for the next season. So, that's 53 because you add on the 8 we currently would carry over. And then you also got to keep in mind that the salary cap for next year, this is projecting a $5 million increase. I'm not sure it's going to be that little. I mean, I think it's going to be more. I think I even heard something about how it was actually supposed to be like $265 million this year, but they elected to push $10 million of the increase to the next year because they thought it was such a huge number to go up by. Especially if, like, revenue doesn't keep up and it goes back down the next year, that could be a disaster for teams. So I think that's why they pushed it down the road. So I think this is at least $265 million, I'd have to think. I mean, every year, other than COVID, it pretty much has blown the numbers out of proportion that we've expected. So I would guess we're probably sitting at about 60 million. And that counts a few things for the next year. So those being Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, fifth-year options. I pulled these off over the cap as well. It goes off of, there's like 4 parameters, like one's normal play time, one's, I think, making a Pro Bowl, then there's like multiple Pro Bowls, and then there's another one involved. But for those, I think, okay, sorry, it's one of them's play time. The second one's play time. Trevor Lawrence meets the play time parameter. So he gets the second lowest of the fifth-year options, while Travis Etienne gets the lowest of the options because he missed that whole first year, hasn't made a Pro Bowl. He only gets paid about $6 million. So these are just pure raw numbers for third-year options. So 2025, looking at your players that you're worrying about replacing, right now it's Aluakon, it's Zay Jones, who, I think he'll be gone this year. Personally, I think it's just a matter of getting the person to replace him right now. And then you're also talking about, Cam Robinson, talking about Brandon Scherf. Josh Allen will need an extension by then, which, if they get that done this year, you have more money you're carrying over at least at that point. You can keep that second-year cost down a little bit. After that, the number's going to have to go up. But there's that, Tyson Campbell, and then Andre Sisco. Probably the big names you're talking about when you're factoring in at the cap. So there's a lot of money to work with right now. Now, I've also put together something for you guys. It's my salary cap in-depth breakdown. And some of these are projected numbers. Those would be numbers that are in italics, so those ones may end up changing. And like I said, this doesn't factor in, what might happen with Cam Robinson's contract, cutting Zay Jones. Things that have not happened are not factored in. But I have 3 categories here. One is the cap hit for the player this year. The second is the APY. For Brandon Scherf's, I'm treating it like it's a new deal because they've essentially, if everything is correct that we understand, have agreed you're going to play this year. We're paying you $11,500,000 to play this year. So that, to me, would be the APY because he only has 1 year left. We're not talking about 2025 yet unless he gets extended, which I don't think will happen. I think he'd be more likely to retire than that, if he doesn't go to another team. And then the final number, this is money pushed to 2025 and beyond. So this is money that after this season is against the cap in 2025 and beyond that was paid out already for play in 2024 or earlier. So this is money pushed down the road, essentially. And so here are how all these numbers compare. And I will quickly sort this. There we go. So you guys can see this. Okay, hold up. Let's not do that because that breaks the code. I wanted to sort it so we get APY involved. Some of these are kind of out of order. But the blue is all new additions to the team, players that were not under contract going into this offseason. So even includes like Josh Allen, Ezra Cleveland. Down here, though, these are comparable costs. So this is our actual number, right? And then down here, this is our comparable cost. So this is the salary cap for this year. And this is the cap hit. Now, this does not factor in the cap rollover, right? But we're just seeing as far as the cap hits compared to how much more money they have to work with this year, how much of it are they spending? Because it's essentially the way the NFL works. You get into a new year, you bring over what you haven't spent, and you're allotted all that money to use for the cap. You can push some down the road, you can use extra money. There's only so much you're putting against the cap, right? But the important number to me is the APY comparison because the comparable cost, same number, right? It's the $255 million that you're being given to spend this year by the NFL, essentially. If this number is higher than the comparable cost, that means that your situation, if you keep that up, You're pushing more money down the road gradually, right? And the more that this is above it, that's the faster you're pushing it down. At this moment, the Jaguars are just over that number. It's really not even that notable because it's 730,000, as you can see down here. Not a huge difference. And then your other number is the 105 million that will be paid out after the season. Or sorry, not paid out after the season. It's against the cap after the season that has already been paid out. So this will be money that has been paid out for this year or for years before that is going to go against the cap in the future. So it's essentially money that's not going to anything productive down the road. It's just paid for the team in the past or this season. So 100 million, basically, right? It's a lot of money. There are teams, I think, that are in worse situations. It's definitely not one of the worst situations in the NFL here in Jacksonville. But you can see there's a lot of money pushed down the road. It's the way that things have been kind of trending since they spent all the money back in the 2022 free agency. And Jacksonville ended up spending a bit this offseason as well. Before the Eric Armstead signing, though, they were set, I think, to kind of make up as far as the cap space goes, right? You look at the APY. If they don't have Eric Armstead in here, you're talking about $239 million. You're saving $16 million against this amount, right? So it's a different scenario. But they got a very good player out of it, and that's fine. And I think for this front office, you talk about what they want to do. Well, they got to win now, right? Like, you can't do necessarily the best option for the long-term future. You have to consider this season too. And so, this isn't a bad number, right? But they're not really making up ground on the cap. They're not fixing it. But you got to keep in mind, this is sort of like, talk about a credit card. Right now, the Jaguars, they say you have a $4,000 credit limit. They probably got about $1,500 on the credit card. Something like that. Maybe it's even a different number. Point is, like, there's more they can put on the credit card to get things now and then pay for that later down the road. So there's room to keep doing that if they want to do it. That's what you got to understand from this. But they do have money pushed down the road. They're not like the Chicago Bears where they've just had tons of money because they basically cut all these huge contracts. Now they're drafting with a ton of picks, and now you see them spending a little bit, trying to catch up, and it kind of in the reverse way of like spending more money now that they've gotten ahead, right? So this is where the Jaguars sit. Now, this might change in the coming days because we're hearing talk about an Ayuk trade. It's a big thing right now. I'm sure if that doesn't work out, the Jaguars will be calling about other players because the way it sounds is they feel like they have to get a wide receiver one for this offense, and they see Brandon Ayuk, their first guy they're talking to at least, as a wide receiver one. So if that happens, you're talking about $14 million being added onto this number. So essentially your difference is about $15 million at that point. You're pushing more cap down the road, and that's fine. You can do that, right? There's a limit to how much you can do it, but it's an option. This next year, you're going to have some contracts coming off here that are going to save you a lot of money. And I think that's what the team needs to prepare for, and it's what they need to prepare for every offseason when they go into the draft. Because if I'm looking at this, I'm talking about contracts that I'm trying to save money on, getting off of them. We're talking about probably Foyesau, Lulicon potentially, if you have the linebackers who can start. There's been so many resources invested that if those players can go, they need to go, right? Now, we'll see, because I think there's a lot of question marks with the draft capital put into it. I don't think it's worked out as it was expected, and I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. But you also got Brandon Scherf on here. I don't think he sticks around with the team. Cam Robinson, if he plays this year with the Jaguars, it's possible he doesn't even stick around. We don't know right now, because the one thing we heard about it, when Trent Baalke was talking about his situation, he said, yeah, he's under contract. I don't understand the ambiguity about this. But he followed that up on his own by saying they were in negotiations with a lot of players. Why do you think he said that? So Cam's probably going to be off this. You're looking at, well, Zay Jones probably being off this year from these numbers. Roy Robertson Harris will probably be a player that they consider it with, realistically. I don't believe any of his contract is actually guaranteed after this upcoming season. So there's some big contracts that we're talking about here that the team can get off of. However, you got some big ones coming up too, right? Josh Allen's number is going to go up. Trevor Lawrence's number is going to go up. You're going to have even Travis Etienne's number, I think, will go up just a little bit. But you've got all your young players from that draft that were picked after the first round. If you keep around Tyson Campbell, you're probably going somewhere in the teens. If you're keeping Andre Sisco, same thing, maybe even higher if he has a breakout year. And you could say that about Tyson as well. You've got players that are going to get paid more. So the cap situation right now, if they get Brandon Ayuk, I think they're overspending just a little bit, which is fine. That's not a huge deal, right? You can do that as long as you're smart about it. And you keep in mind that the cap is going to go up every year. We're going to have more money. We've got lots of inflation in our country. That is a huge factor into this right now. So even if it goes up a little bit what you're spending each year, that's fine. So those are the numbers I got for you guys. We'll see how far off I am on these. I might be off a little bit. Who knows right now? If I'm being honest, I don't know what the exact numbers will be, but I hope these are pretty close for you, and it gives you an idea of where the Jaguars are at right now as far as spending. But if I had to say what's going to happen, I think they're going to probably try to get a trade done. If I had to bet right now, I would actually say it gets done unless another team swoops in. We'll see. But don't expect a lot of spending outside that. I think the Jaguars have made their moves. Right now, you're talking about probably getting a wide receiver 1, which is what they're trying to trade for. You're talking about getting another outside linebacker, ideally for the 3-4 looks with Josh Allen. Even if you want to have Trayvon Walker stay at outside linebacker, you don't have the backup. So they've got to make moves there, in my opinion. And the rest of it, it's just preparing for the future. Getting pieces that can negate some of these cap hits that you have right now so you can move off some expensive contracts and be ready to compete long term. And get ready for a Trevor Lawrence $50 million deal each year. So that's what they got to do. But that's all I've got for you guys. I appreciate you watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll keep you updated on anything else I hear. But finally, go Jags.